So we would love for everybody to just join us in, what do we want for a tarot deck? What are your ideas? Pull from different aspects of the story, the franchise, be it monsters or characters. Though, please, when you do so, and we'll largely host this on our Discord. We'll make a channel for it. Don't go into a bunch of spoilers for the story that you're pulling from. Not everybody will have read all the books. And, with the recent push, let's keep everybody with a chance to be able to enjoy the books as we go. So please weigh in, give us your ideas, and we look forward to discussing with you on Discord.
In the distant future, vampires rule the night, but their numbers are dwindling. One podcast is unlike all the others. Half human, half vampire. This is Lefty Speaks, the official podcast for Vampire Hunter D.
All right, well, let's get into it. Card 0 is the Fool. And the aspects of it are the air element. Its planet/zodiac symbol is the planet Uranus. Qualities associated with it most commonly are freedom, lust for life, beginnings, and adventure, with symbols commonly associated to it are a white rose, a small bundle, small animals, and a precipice. And the character that we thought would, out of the early stories, potentially represent the Fool is the Barbaroi Elder. For all his confidence, for all his supposed wisdom and leadership, they just get cooked.
They're also a bit wacky. I mean, like that's one of my favorite characters in the animated film. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know they are powerful and wise, but also a bit of a wild card. You just don't know what they're gonna do, I think that's a perfect. For me, that was what I first thought of as well for the Fool.
If you have again anywhere else in the franchise that you want to pull from, if you wish to voice agreement or disagreement with that suggestion, please feel free. Toss into the discussion. The next card, card 1, the Magician. The Magician aspects include the air element, association to the planet Mercury, the qualities of determination, focus, skill, and manifestation, with traditional symbols including a wand, an altar, various tools, and the infinity symbol. And our thought for who could represent the Magician card was Bengi, the member of the Barbaroi that fought with shadows. And for me, what put him in my mind was the shadow string spell that he used to capture D that he thought would, last forever. And no, it's not perfectly the infinity symbol, but I thought that was interesting. He's got the little finger puzzle and you can kind of trace out loops together. I'm a dork, I know.
I think that's what's exciting about this, because there's lots of like powerful wizards and magicians in the novel series, right? So So there isn't really, outside of maybe one, where I think we've all agreed, but we haven't said yet. There's maybe one obvious one, but all the others, there's so much potential. There's like really like no right answer, right? It's just we come up with different ideas and we can share those ideas, and then we'll either like put them to a vote or something. We'll figure out a way that we can come to a decision on them. But I think this is a good suggestion for sure.
Then the next card, card 2, is the High Priestess. The qualities and parts associated to the High Priestess include the water element, the moon, qualities of dreams, intuition, and subconscious, and associated symbols are often a temple, a cross, a crown, and a scroll. This is one where I personally am kind of torn and unsure, particularly from the first couple of books. I had put down Caroline. She was the plant manipulation lady in Bloodlust as the High Priestess, but I think there are far, far better choices throughout the franchise. But again, this list was limited to just the first couple of books for where we were pulling ideas from. You guys, do you have any thoughts on who else do you think in the franchise, or for the High Priestess?
Yeah, I mean, there's my first instinct was it Doris, the daughter of in the first season, in the first movie, Lee's daughter, elder daughter, isn't it Doris? Yes. I'm sorry. Yeah, that was my first instinct was that, just because she kind of, but she doesn't really fit that either. She's not a queen in my. I think there's definitely some better people out there for her.
You use Cecile from Message from Mars. She was a precog.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
And well, she's on the moon, right? So that symbol, and obviously there's lots of crosses.
Alrighty. The actually, following that comment, the next card on the list, card 3, is the Empress. And the aspects to the Empress are the Earth element, the planet Venus, qualities of fertility, creativity, and abundance. Symbols often associated are 12 stars, a crown, a shield, and a throne. And I had put down Cecil from Message from Mars, since she's stuck on a throne. And not perfect, because we're talking about symbols of abundance and fertility. They don't have kids, so it's not in my mind a perfect match. But again, this is where I'm hoping we hear from people, like, where do you guys see that coming from? Who do you think out of the universe fits some of these qualities in the various stories? And you guys have the whole franchise to pull from for audience. You're not limited like we limited ourselves to just the first couple of stories or adaptation work that we've done. Neal, Brandon, if you guys have any thoughts on any of these, chime in, or I'm just going to keep plowing through the list here.
Yeah, I mean, part of me, like as much as I want to drop names, part of me also wants to not drop too many names, because I'm more curious to see what the community thinks. But yeah, there's a lot of characters to choose from.
I mean, you can also look at the woman that the vampire fell in love with in Demon Death Chase, or also known as Bloodlust. I mean, she would be a great person, because she, at the end, well, I don't want to spoil anything, but she leaves the planet, and we don't know what her fate actually is, because she's going to be in a city in the sky.
Yeah.
So that's something else to consider. But yeah, I agree. I feel like I don't want to influence it too much. I mean, we have some great suggestions, but it'd be really cool to hear what other people felt, and have a great. I'm looking forward to a conversation on Discord. Real soon.
Yeah, the Discord, when we've discussed favorite villains and other things. I've what I love is that, because I've read all the books, but not super recently. So I forgot, like, oh, I think this one and this one and this one, and then the Discord will drop 4 names, 4 different names. I'm like, wow, those are really good. That's a really, but it's kind of like the Star Wars universe, right? It's like,
Right.
I'll never forget. I was put on the spot once, and people were like, oh, who's your favorite female villain, right? And of course, I have Asajj Ventress has been ever since the first time she appeared in Clone Wars. That's been like, she was my favorite, right? But on a podcast, I was being interviewed, and I drew a complete blank. So it's always nice to be reminded of characters that would fit. So that's also really nice, because none of us have a perfect memory.
Indeed. Alrighty. Well, the next on the list is the Emperor. And the Emperor is associated with the fire element, the zodiac symbol of Aries, qualities of masculinity, strength, and control, with the symbols of a throne, scepter, mountains, and a shield. So on the list, I had put down France, again, from Message from Mars, being the opposite to Cecile, as they became the vampire lords of the colony. So, anybody, please weigh in. Who do you think would be a good representation for Christopher Schei to depict as the Emperor from the VHD universe?
You could do Count Magnus Lee.
Yeah, that's my
Yeah.
that was. I mean, outside of fire, that was my first thought was, yeah. I mean, a lot of those things fit him. And also, he was kind of the original baddie, for those of us that saw the first animated D before we read any of the books.
Yep.
So yeah, that was my first thought as well.
Yeah, because in my mind, he looks like Lee Majors from the $6 Million Man. Like when I see that the way they drew him. He kind of, I mean, if I was going to do a visual reference, I would use Lee Major.
No,
That's Count Magnus Lee.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Even like with one eye is kind of like not as open as the other. We just need. Sorry, we're showing our age. We're showing our age on that one.
I hated that sound effect so much. I hate that sound effect.
I watched a documentary talking about it was like a short, like a bit in a documentary about the $6 Million Man and the franchise and everything, and that how there was a big argument that they had some other sound effect going on, and it wasn't working, like people weren't, and so it was just the stupid sound, but apparently the audience loved it. So then they started including it more, and it's like the cheesiest sound ever. And I mean, like again, it's so 70s. I mean, like what can you say? What can you say?
Aye. And I would also like to encourage that for the role of the Emperor and the Empress, it could also be a character that wasn't of the villain. So, and occasionally, there were a couple examples of historical kings and emperors that, weren't terrible. They were good for their people. Well,
we have Marcus Aurelius, as
just most monarchies did not work out that way.
Although I'm sure those who we conquered probably wouldn't agree with me on that one.
Right?
Unfortunately, I don't think anyone who has like become emperor could is universally loved, because they did conquer people, right?
Yep.
So
in the worst way.
Yeah.
Alrighty, moving down the list, we have the Hierophant, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, associated with the element of earth, the Taurus symbol, qualities of wisdom, being a teacher and an inner guide, with symbols commonly being a temple, robes, across and gestures of benediction.
Wow.
And I know that my pick for this is pretty far off. I had put down the Three Snake Sisters, since
Wow.
they were in their bewitching. In my head, I'm like, well, that's kind of an inner guide, and they originally appear in robes in a bit of a almost kind of like cave temple-ish setting to themselves, and they bewitch D. Now, like I said, this one's really stretching it for this particular card and its elements. I know that is not the greatest of choices, so I hope people will weigh in the discussion and save me from myself.
Yeah, I mean, that suggestion reminds me a bit that, like, I've kind of envisioned them as kind of like the D's version of the Norns, or of like the Fates, and or maybe even who are the characters in Greek mythology where the three sisters share one eye, and
Yeah, they would pass it around.
yeah,
Right,
and they
right,
have to
right.
pass it around, and they're kind of they're I think, aren't they the ones that tell Perseus that he has to go kill the Gorgon or something like that? So, and again, my specialty is not Greek mythology, so my apologies, audience. I'm sure I will be corrected. I'm sure of it. But
Yes, please fact check us.
yes. Being right, we're happy to be corrected if we say something wrong here, for sure.
Indeed. Let's see here. Next on the list, card 6 is The Lovers. And the Lovers are associated with the air element, the Gemini zodiac symbol. Qualities are typically associated with self-love, relationships, and duality, because it's pair. Symbols often include a cherub or angel, the tree of life, a serpent, and an apple. Obviously, some references here to Adam and Eve as part of the creation story there. And I have down for the Lovers, the most obvious choice, Meyer and Charlotte. So I definitely I went for the low hanging apple there.
Well, I think there's a lot of potential. For that. I mean, there's lots and lots of really good choices. But also, my instinct, again, because we limited ourselves to the first 4 novels, and a little bit more, that was the obvious choice for me too. And that's also because you're talking about duality. I mean, Marcus is a vampire and Charlotte isn't. I mean, so there's a lot more depth to that than just, I think, the obvious lovers, the main lovers in the two films we have, right? So I think that's a solid choice, but I know there's a lot of good choices out there.
Yes. And my one request for this particular card is, as much as people like to fan fiction it, we're sticking with universe accurate lore. So D cannot be one of the lovers.
Right.
Yes, don't ship D with anybody, please.
This is the one piece of art where I'm going to say D cannot be on.
You're gonna get fan fiction, man, and now we're opening up to fan fiction with people, having their fantasies about dating.
That's a whole other podcast.
We're closing the door to fan fiction here for this movie. It has to be universe accurate. It has to come from one of Kikuchi's novels. Has to be one of the stories. Let's see here then. Card 7 is the Chariot. And for the Chariot, it is typically associated with the water element, the Cancer zodiac symbol, shown by the qualities of action, momentum, and domination. Symbols often associated with it are the Sphinx, shield, armor, and a crown of stars. And again, I think I went with the low-hanging fruit here. Myers carriage.
I think that's a solid choice, but also the Marcus Brothers armored
tank thing.
truck tank.
Yep.
I mean, that would work too. But also, couldn't Dee's horse be considered a chariot? I mean, not a chariot in a strict terms, but it is a symbol of how a D moves around, and he's obviously had to change it out several times throughout the novels.
Yes.
Yeah, there seems to be a very strong connection between Vampire Hunter D and some elements in Dungeons and Dragons, because in D&D, that would be called a nightmare. Knighthmare, and it's really interesting because even in the Dungeons and Dragons 80s animation, Venger, the bad guy, his horse looks exactly like Dee's horse. It's really, really interesting across there. So, I feel like there's also kind of a Dungeons and Dragons vibe to modern terror art design. So I feel like there's definitely been an influence creeping in, and we can if we talk about conventions today. If not, then I'll get to that about what I saw. But there's definitely D&D is definitely taking over again, and that's definitely something we can think about in regards to D.
I wouldn't argue against that.
Well, next on the list is strength. And strength is typically associated with the element of fire, the Leo zodiac sign, the qualities of energy, confidence, and force. And typically the symbols are a lion, white robes, a crown of flowers, and the infinity symbol.
Who was the dude with the rocket hammer in Bloodlust?
Nolt.
Yeah.
No, the first one Bengi kills. He's a giant muscly guy. And this is a card that I've seen the widest range of change of symbols on in recent tarot decks that I've looked at. Instead of a line like I said, I've seen dragon, a bear. I think I've seen as much as it wasn't associated, something that looked fairly close to a sphinx. And so in my head, I kind of saw, well, D on a cyber horse, and we're just switching the cyber horse for the lion. So I don't think it's a perfect one, given the different elements that are typically associated with the card. So I'm very open to hearing, what do people think? And one of the things I find interesting about it being the card called Strength is that it also includes a crown of flowers. And that's one of the things I find interesting about tarot and the history of it, is that typically when you think of strength, you don't think of flowers. Yet, if you think about it from a certain perspective, nature has shown itself in so many ways to be incredibly resilient. And you think of things that devastate the landscape, like a volcanic eruption or massive wildfires. Yet, long before humanity tries to push back into devastated areas, you'll see small plants coming back. I find that an interesting difference of perspective on it. Next card on the list is the Hermit. Earth element, Virgo symbol, qualities of quiet, solitude, and wisdom. Symbols are often a lantern, a mountaintop, robes, and a staff. I had thought of Polk, who's has one of my favorite scenes in Bloodlust. It's the old man who sells D his replacement cyber horse, and tells the story of Dee's history with that particular town. For me, it's if the hermit is quiet and solitude, I think that guy fits. And his rifle kind of looked like a staff. It was a funky looking rifle. So, kind of close. Just please, for anybody listening to this, do not use a rifle as a walking stick. Please do not do that. So, who do you all think is an exemplar of, how many stories do we have throughout history of the hermit wise man? So, throughout the D universe, who do you think potentially exemplified that? Could it be, she wasn't much of a loner. Could it be somebody like Granny Viper? Just to toss out different character that's further in the franchise. So sorry if I've stolen somebody's idea with that one. So we'll keep trucking along. The next card on the list is the Wheel of Fortune. Fire element, planet Jupiter. Qualities are change, cycles, eternal return, with symbols of angels, beasts, Anubis, the Sphinx, and the Torah. And for Wheel of Fortune, I had actually picked Pluto, the main side character from Tale of Dead Town, as he, I think, represents change throughout the story. And I don't want to get into too much of why I picked Pluto, because I think it's a little spoilery for the story if you haven't read Tale of the Dead Town. Where I think it does break off a bit is some of the symbols, particularly like angels and beasts. Where I do think he fits is the Torah, because Pluto has gives himself this ridiculously long, pretentious name. And I don't know if any of you have ever had to read the beginning of what Christianity calls the Old Testament. I think Islam as well calls it the Old Testament. And for Jewish faith, it's just the Torah or the Pentateuch. Holy moly. There are some insanely long titles and genealogies there. Oh, that is some dry reading to study for. So to me, it kind of fit because he has this insanely long, pretentious name that nobody wants to use, except for Pluto. So I'm curious, guys, what do you think on not necessarily the character that could represent it, but the fact that this card has elements associated to it and traditionally associated to it that involve both Egyptian mythology and Judeo-Christian Islamic.
I mean, people get into a conversation from time to time about where these religions came from. Most human religions, particularly coming out of Mesopotamia, going way back to that, basically worship the sun because the sun was light and safety and also help for agriculture, which was the Neolithic Revolution, as they call it, right? So I feel like there will always be a connection between the Middle East and most modern theologies, period. Because when you really get into it, their world was only this very small sphere that was like basically what Persia, Ottoman Empire, Northeast Africa, and parts of Asia. So yeah, it's really cool that you can have that crossover. But if you go back far enough, if you go reverse from Judaism back to Egypt, there are connections there. So I feel like people who are not as conversant on global history may think it's kind of weird, but if you know anything about the history of religion, you know that these things are kind of intrinsically connected anyway. So to have that kind of be concentric circles in visuals in these themes makes perfect sense, because ultimately they're all worshiping light, and light is quote unquote good, and darkness not always is evil, but is the opposite, sort of like Set and Ra and things like that. And then you have Lucifer, who's light, but then God or Yahweh is, above him, so forth and so on. So this is a long story, but I feel like it's pretty cool that they actually did that, for the deck.
Yeah, Brandon, I think that's a really good point about the history of what we call, the area of the cradle of civilization. Since, if I remember correctly, somebody can weigh in on this if I remember it wrong, because it's been so long since I studied comparative religion, that the origin of the Israelis and Islam goes back to the brothers Jacob and Esau. So all the different people of that region have such an entwined history. It's crazy to think about. And I think for myself, growing up in America, we don't have, these centuries long, traditions and histories, because, America's not even been around for 300 years.
No.
We think of something as a family tradition because grandma started it. Whereas, you look at things in the Middle East, and there are buildings that have been there for a couple thousand years. So,
or China's like 5,000 years old, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember this was a couple decades ago, but my mom was in Japan, and she brought me back a couple of T-shirts, and they were from a contest that was held for design a shirt to symbolize your traditional business. The restriction was that your business had to have been in continuous operation for a minimum of 400 years.
Woo!
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I was going to say that, yeah.
So I had a shirt depicting bamboo furniture, one depicting a wide range of drums. One was a fishing business. So I think that for VHD fans in countries that have, where you grew up with, that long-standing, ancient culture roots, I'm wondering, what their difference of perspective on the tarot deck and these ancient elements it pulls from, compared to, North America, where, our cultural traditions and history are a couple hundred years old at best. I mean,
if we're talking about, obviously, the United States of America, because I grew up on the Yankton Sioux Indian Reservation, and
they do have
obviously
centuries old.
They have,
Yeah.
I mean, the over
millennia
500
old.
native nations that were in North America alone, many of them can trace their roots back, hundreds, if not thousands of years. And when I'm originally from, my family lives in Sedona, and you can see, ancient rock paintings and
Right.
different structures that have been around for 1,000 or more years as well. Now, again, how much does that influence, the modern day United States? And not as much as say, like when I was living in Japan. One of my favorite things was, in Tokyo there is a shrine that is a little shrine, and it's all made of wood and rock, and it's 1,200 or more years old, and it sits right between two skyscrapers. It's like these two modern buildings as you can get, and then in like a 40-foot wide little patch, there's a little shrine that's 1,200 years old, and it's been there, obviously, long before any of the modern capabilities. I mean, there's no nails in the shrine itself.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
yeah. So it's just so cool to see. So going back to, Brendan, your point, it's really interesting because the aspects of tarot have, the tarot deck have clearly as I had mentioned in the very beginning, many people do trace it back to somewhere in ancient Egypt, but it has been adapted and used by all these different cultures
Yeah.
along the way. So you have Christian symbols, in it, and then of course some aspects of Christianity, outlawed the tarot deck for various
Right.
reasons as
The
demonic.
satanic
So,
panic.
exactly. So it's like, well, they adopted it, but then they banned it, but then they embraced it again, and and so it's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's an aspect in the Old Testament where they talk about the praying for direction and decision, and if they couldn't reach a resolution, there's reference to something called the Urim and Thummim, and my father was a ancient languages and scholar for this region and religions, and I remember asking him about this once, and he's like, we have no idea what the Urim and Thummim is. And he's like, I consider that probably a good thing, because if it was some kind of, the Jewish tradition of like the dreidel and different dice, if the Urim and Thummim was something that like what we think of the equivalent of, I don't know, the Magic 8 Ball. I'm sure some scholar's going to skewer me for this one. But he told me once, I'm glad we don't know exactly what it is, because, do we want people saying, well, I'm going to roll dice to figure this out, or whatever the equivalent was. So I think that there are some very interesting elements to ancient religions that we have ideas of, but we just don't understand, because that was a couple thousand years ago. So, but, we're close, but not sure. And that's one of the things I find interesting about the tarot deck and the references it makes is, how it's pulled from the past, but it's also been changed over time. If anybody has ever looked at Middle English to modern English,
Yeah. Wow.
Wow.
It's very different.
holy
Very different.
moly, is that a shift?
Yeah.
And if language can shift that much in those kind of time frames, what are we looking at for traditions, for mythology, for, if you will, kind of the fables, the parables,
Yeah.
stories that are used to teach. So I find that in the tarot cards associated elements absolutely fascinating.
One real quick thing about that would be, and one place you can see this right now would be in the Creole subculture of Louisiana and the Mississippi Delta region of the U.S., where you have a lot of these. It's a melange of beliefs that come from not only West Africa, but from France and parts of India, as well as the Middle East, all congregated in this one small geographic area on the Gulf Coast, the Gulf of Mexico coast. Let me be more specific, Gulf of Mexico. And that area today has a very deep culture of tarot, and also of what they call, well, voodoo is the wrong term for it, but what people would consider to be voodoo and things of that nature come from a mingling of West African religion and old school Catholicism, Roman Catholicism. And you see it in the Caribbean as well. So there's actually a very, very, very strong tarot culture within the U.S., but especially in the Deep South, Mississippi Delta, Louisiana, which is the most probably genetically diverse group of human beings that we have in North America. It's interesting.
Yeah, that's to me one of the things I find fascinating about the history of so many of these things is where it came from, how it all blended together, and ways people have adapted it. So, well, the next card is the one you've all already seen. It is Justice, which has been done as Vampire Hunter D, wielding a sword. So it has the air element associated to the Libra symbol, and it is associated with balance, morality, and ethics, with symbols of scales, robes, temples, and swords. So if you go take a look at that image for D as Justice, you'll see what Chris has incorporated in for the different elements. And one of the things I found kind of sad is the picture after it got released got shared on the Vampire Hunter D subreddit. And somebody jumped in decrying it as a AI generated image, and it should be banned, and the poster should be banned for sharing AI art. And a bunch of people, were like, this was part of an official post, and it was done by Christopher Shai, one of the artists for the franchise, and people started cataloging a history of Christopher's work to this person, accusing it of being AI because he doesn't have his hand fully gripped on the sword. He's loosely holding it.
Yeah.
This might be the same guy who told me I was lying about selling Vampire Hunter D books.
And so, please,
Jesus.
there are enough problems in the world without making up new things to be enraged
Exactly.
about.
Yeah, I had to educate someone on Adrian Smith's art. They're like, because he also, the artists that have a very a unique style, that include stylized, like hands, anything that are that obviously AI does traditionally make certain mistakes, like beaks, talons, hands. Things like
fingers,
capes, fingers, hair, things like that, right? So people are now, suddenly experts on art, and I just on social media, I just posted a Game of Thrones. Brace yourselves for a new wave, of experts. And yeah, Adrian Smith is also a renowned artist in fantasy. Cards and role-playing games and covers, and now obviously like tabletop board games and things like that. And just because it doesn't, it has a certain style doesn't necessarily mean that it's AI art. And I am confident in saying that our team will never share what would be considered AI art. So
Yeah, we're not going to be doing some
No.
generative, anything that's going to be, hey, we'd like you to buy, this, or this is something that's going to become a part of the official catalog of the art, language, and design that's going to go on a cover or be in the book or anything that we do. That doesn't interest me. There's a lack of creativity there. And I remember when Chris and I were talking about the art and changes and elements we made, if one of the things it calls for are the scales of justice. And if you have such a tight grip on the sword that you've already decided that you're gonna the sword's gonna fall on whoever you use before you to be judged, well, that's not very just per se if you're administering justice. So the art and the different elements, I'm like, okay, that's a different way of sharing that with the art. So yeah, I find that fascinating. Going on, we've got a couple more cards to go through here. The next card is the Hanged Man.
Ooh.
Water element, planet Neptune. The things associated typically are suspension, sacrifice, and meditation. And symbols are often a tree, a halo, a triangle, and a cross. And my thought for the Hanged Man was Grove Marcus. From Bloodlust, the guy who with the injection has the astral projection. And so that was my thought on potentially the Hanged Man. I don't think he's a great choice. I picked him because of the sacrifice element to it. And,
What about Left Hand?
Lefty.
Lefty.
Yeah. Yeah, because I feel like well, I don't want to get too much into my thoughts about who and what he is, but I feel like he may qualify in some levels.
Okay. I had actually put Lefty as a different card at the end of the list, so that's
okay.
I think influenced me why I didn't pick him for this one. But I can see where you're going. Yeah, I can see. Yeah. Yeah, I can get behind what you're thinking.
Yeah, I had at one point thought Lefty would be great as the Hermit. So
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right, next card is Death. Also has the water element associated to it. The symbol from the zodiac of the Scorpio. It's associated with change, cycles, and release. Symbols are often a horse, a flag, a river, and towers. And my thought for a character representing death was actually Carmilla. Because, you know, she's been pinned in death in the coffin. She was fighting to resurrect and get released from her suffering. She's in a castle, so, you know, towers. And she seemed like a fitting thing as a villain, as we often see death as a villain. I don't know that death is all, you know, necessarily a villain. It's just kind of a fact of life.
Right.
yeah.
Like Galactus.
Well, and clearly she's been responsible for a lot of death.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, clearly many people met their end at that castle. I mean, how else would she? She bathes in blood and everything. So, and she, she lured, people there. So,
Yep. All right. Card 14 is Temperance. Temperance has the element of fire associated with the Sagittarius symbol. Elements of protection, moderation, and balance, and symbols often associated are an angel, robes, triangle within a square, and water. And for this, I actually had put down the church bell tower from the early part of Bloodlust, where Dee meets Charlotte's family, where they hire him. And I don't know that that's, again, the best fit, but for me, I saw it as, the family and Dee, as they argue, there's a discussion for trying to save Charlotte, moderation of action, the admonishing of, don't threaten Dee, we can work this out, but please do your best to rescue my sister. But if you can't rescue her, free her, bring me proof. And it's not perfect, so please weigh in, folks. Going down the list, the Devil. Earth element, Capricorn symbol, associated to passion, creativity, and lust, and symbolized by the pentagram, flames, shackles, and Baphomet. I know I'm butchering that.
Oh, Baphomet.
And for the Devil, I had put down Count Magnus Lee.
that works as well. Yeah.
I think his castle could also be the one in the previous card too, because his castle was one big trap.
Yeah.
That
is true. That is true.
No. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting because, and this is kind of the beauty of the tarot cards themselves, right? Is that they, when you're reading them, when you're playing them, they can be interpreted in many different ways, based on, whether they're right side up, whether they're upside down, what order that they come in, because there's a synergy between the cards when they're read, and then the layout of the cards that you're actually reading them in. Because they might, if it's your past, if it's your present, if it's your the hurdle that you have, if it's your background, there's so many different things that can then inform you in how to read what's important in that particular card. So, in that sense, I mean, there's so many right answers. I mean, like I'm a Sagittarius, right? So in one of the previous cards, I had Berghoff, because he's an archer, and it doesn't fit a lot of the other aspects of the card, but because it's attributed with Sagittarius, and then I obviously, as the archer, I thought that. So I think there's lots of great answers, and I'm really excited to see the discussion. We always have really great discussions in the Discord, so people don't just give an answer, but they also give their reason, their motivation, and I have to say I've learned quite a bit in our discussion groups.
Alrighty, the next one is the Tower. We have 6 cards left in the Major Arcana deck, and the Tower is associated with the Fire element, the planet Mars, interchange, identity crisis, destruction for the qualities to it, and often is symbolized by a stone structure, flames and fire, a falling body or bodies, and gold coins. My thought for this is Dead Town, the actual the city that's the centerpiece of the story. And for everybody who's read the story, I think I think it will make sense to why that was my pick for the Tower. So I would love to hear what anybody else thinks of, because there are a lot of towers and castles where bodies fall, there's treasure, gold coin, throughout the franchise. So please weigh in.
There's definitely some interesting structures in Vampire Hunter D.
Yes. No. Yes. The next one is the Star. The air element, Aquarius symbol, qualities of awakening, guidance, and hope, with symbols including water, a bird or butterflies, the tree of life, and vessels or containers. And for the Star, I had actually put down Doris Lang. And I don't know if that's the best choice, but for me, it's hope is something that you have in spite of the obstacles, and the adversities that you face. And after being bit, the town turning against her, she actively looked for everything that she could do to save herself, to have a light at the end of the tunnel and get there. And to me, that is a story of hope. You didn't give up. You didn't just resign yourself to fate. You didn't just all right, I guess I'm a vampire bride now. That's it. So that was my thought on that. So I would love to hear, who do you think from the Vampire Hunter franchise embodies these qualities? Or as a literal star in the sky. The next card is the Moon. And water element, Pisces zodiac sign, and intuition, gestation, and illusion for elements associated with it. And symbols are often a dog, wolf, columns, and crawfish. I have no idea where the crawfish comes from on the Moon. I have no idea. I know nothing about crawfish other than finding them in streams occasionally as a kid at summer camp.
Yeah.
I know that in certain parts of the world, crawfish cook-offs are something people absolutely love. I have some of my friends from Southeast Asia who talk about that all the time, but I am not a crawfish connoisseur. My choice for the moon card is literally the moon, since I think of the scene in Bloodlust where D is on the horse at the beginning. He's grabbed the arrow out of the air, the cape's flying, and there's a giant full moon behind him.
Yeah,
that was my pick of what would be the card. So everybody else, please weigh in. I'm curious to see if anybody has thoughts of something different, for or against. Down to the last three. The sun. Clearly, the fire element, the sun is the celestial body associated to the card, representing vitality, new life, and energy. And symbols often include a naked child, a banner of victory, a white horse, and sunflowers. By the way, sunflower seeds, sunflower seed oil, wonderful piece of toast. Sorry for whoever's hungry. And I had picked Lori Knight for the choice. And this is a character out of Deadtown, and this is slightly twisted, but she starts the story getting radiation poisoning, and solar radiation is a thing that's been talked about a lot recently. So that's the direction my head went in putting those things together, which is probably not the best. So somebody save me from myself.
I had at one time thought Dracula, but we don't have any imagery of Dracula. D's father, right? So, just as in kind of the whole reason Vampire Hunter D exists in this world setting is his father, D.
Mm-hmm.
The great ancestor. So, and again, so there's lots of different interpretations. I know my answer isn't the best either. So, but it was just something that, that metaphorically I thought that fit. So.
Cool. All right. We're down to the last two. Card number 20. And that's the other thing about the tarot deck I find interesting is traditionally the Fool is card 0. So there's 22 cards, but they're numbered 0 through 21. Difference in history of how we look at it.
The Fool has special rules.
Yeah. Judgment is the card. Element of fire associated with the planet of Pluto, not the Disney dog. Elements of awakening, renewal, forgiveness, and symbols of an angel, mountains, and a trumpet. And for judgment, this is where I had put Lefty. Because
okay. Yeah.
if there is any judgmental character in this entire franchise, it's Lefty.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah.
So, I don't necessarily think it's the best, but he constantly, forgives D of all the shortcomings he assigns to him and revives him from the dead on multiple occasions. So, renewal.
Yeah. Well, and also he, as the, in tradition, he speaks his mind to D, when not everybody else can, right?
Yep.
Right.
So, yeah.
And the last card in the set for the Major Arcana is the World. Element of Earth, the planet Saturn, qualities of catharsis, totality, and completion. Symbols often include a dancing figure, wreath of laurels, lion or a bull, cherubs and eagles, and the zodiac. And my choice for the World centered around the ideas of kind of totality or completion, going full circle, a bit of catharsis. Layla's granddaughter, the ending scene from Bloodlust. They're there putting flowers on her grave, and the person who thought she would die alone, it's a bunch of people who, like her, changed their mind about a Dhampir because of her stories.
Yeah.
And her granddaughter approaches Dee not with fear, but inviting him to family dinner. And I see that as kind of a totality of a change of fate. And it's, in my mind, a bit
Great
of
ending.
catharsis
Great
for this story.
It's a nice ending. Yeah, exactly.
That is the list of the 22 major arcana. And we would love to get your feedback and thoughts. Please brainstorm with us. Share your ideas of what you think would be good for creating a series of tarot card art. And so if you look up the piece that Chris has already made, you'll see that it's not just narrowed to what would be a card. It's a full piece of art that would be used not just for this, but for comic book covers and who knows where else in the franchise. So please weigh in, give us your ideas, and we look forward to hearing your ideas and discussing with you on Discord. If you need to get a hold of Discord, check out our links that are all over the place. It is discord.gg/vampirehunterD is the name of the server. So hopefully you all can find it, and would love to talk to you then. Thank you kindly. Happy hunting, and we'll catch you in the next one.
See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Lefty Speaks, the official Vampire Hunter D podcast, hosted by Brandon Easton, Neal Fischer, and Scott McLean. This podcast is created by Unified Pictures and 9 Realms. Narration by Lauren Evallen-Muller. Recording and editing by 9 Realms. Produced by Scott McLean and Ian E. Muller. Based on the works created by Hideyuki Kikuchi. Happy hunting.